means I can start the recording and say, hi, folks. Welcome back to school. And some of you are thinking, yeah, I worked all break. I never left. Yes, that happens too. But at least hopefully when you were working, you could do so in the confines of your own home with whatever beverages you need to get through and comfy clothing and all that sorts of stuff. But we're here. We're making it work. So I am super excited to be getting to do an advanced longitudinal class for the first time in 5 years, I think. I looked at what I had done 5 years ago in the most recent version and realized that most of it was either outdated or covered in other classes. So this is going to be a lot of new stuff. Hopefully you've all found the website here, which is where all of the stuff is going to be. The exception is the readings. Those are hosted on Icon. So everything that you need basically is going to be linked from this page. And for those of you who were alive in like 1997 and are thinking, yeah, it wants its web design back, 1997 called it wants its table back. Yes, you're not wrong. This is a very antiquated looking website and I'm proud of it because it's one page that I have to update and that makes my life easier. If you've met me before, which I think everybody here has been in at least one of my classes before, you know that I color code all the websites. And so this one I had to think about because yellow is for longitudinal. But this semester, we're diving into a lot of the world of structural equation modeling to do longitudinal research. So I had to do the purple as the outline because purple was the SEM color. So it's deliberately like the mishmash of the two. So there's my line of thinking on all of that. So this is where the stuff is. To keep myself from rambling too far, I put together a little PowerPoint just to start us off for the semester. What to expect, because this course is going to have some novel aspects to it relative to what I typically get to do. All right, so we are here to continue your journey of longitudinal modeling, where I define longitudinal as an analysis of repeated observations from the same sampling unit. So just as we had before, units can be anything. I tend to think about people as the unit that's being measured repeatedly, but some of you are measuring like families repeatedly. Does that sound right? Yes, yes, there's one. Some of you might be measuring companies or countries, businesses repeatedly. Yes, some nods on those. Anybody doing animal research? Measuring rats repeatedly? Pigeons? Yeah, see pigeons? Yeah. Units can be anything. So I will differentiate sampling designs where it's more complicated, but generally speaking, if I say between and within person, for instance, you can substitute between and within family or between and within school and have it mean the same thing. Repeated also is a term that is deliberately vague in that it could be anything from observations every 10 years to observations every 10 milliseconds. It depends on the context of the study. Last semester, and in the first version of this class that was offered for several of you, I think about 18 months ago, 3 semesters ago, we had only independent observations, and we were sticking with the world of 2-level models for observed outcomes. And all 3 of those simplifications are going to be expanded this semester. So the end of the semester, actually, I'm tackling sampling designs of people who are also nested in groups, whether the groups are constant over time or varying over time, as well as outcomes that are not fully observed. So a lot of people have asked me if you can do longitudinal analysis, say, of latent variables. Why, yes, yes you can, it's just harder. But that's going to be one of the things that we get a chance to look at because ideally, that is what we would do, is to try to measure everything as adequately as possible using latent variables in a lot of those cases, and then look at change in latent space rather than observed scores. So it's still not going to be a class that would be like what you'd find in the stats department or the biostats department. I am sticking very much with an applied emphasis. It's going to have a lot of examples, here's the same ideas 3 different ways, because the world of longitudinal modeling, people tend to approach it from one perspective at the expense of some of the others. And what I'd like for all of you to be able to do is to figure out what framework or modeling approach or what version of the software is going to work best for your particular situation, and to have all of them at your disposal. Not just be like, well, I never learned SEM, so everything has to be multi-level, or I never learned multi-level, so everything has to be SEM. So there's going to be even more language and more logic, and the papers that I have given you that go with the textbook, I think the oldest reference is maybe 2003. And there's a whole bunch of papers that have come out within the last few years so that you can start getting exposed to some of the more modern ways that people are talking about longitudinal models. And I will do my best to try and help you link what are, yeah, that's the same thing just with a different set of words versus, no, this is actually a different idea. Because sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. So all of us can do this. Even if you don't have longitudinal data immediately at your disposal, it's a very common thing to want to measure change, both in educational settings, in research settings, in life settings. And so I hope that these skills will help you down the road. I do a focus on mastery learning still. I don't do tests. I don't believe in the validity of a test for something where even I can't necessarily tell you what it is off the top of my head, and I need to remind myself. This stuff is going to be fairly complex. I have 8 units planned, where a unit is my organizational structure for the combination of a lecture and 1 or more sets of examples that go with it. This semester, we are using a couple different packages. I am dropping SAS for the most part, although if I run out of time, there may be some legacy SAS stuff that's in there, and focusing on Stata, R, and M+. More about that in just a second. As usual, everything is take-home, open note, and untimed. The only exception to that is that there is going to be one component of your requirements where you're doing a project, and you'll have to do a class presentation that, for obvious reasons, must be timed. Making sure that you can hit your presentation length is a very important skill to have as an academic in particular. Late work, I accept with a little bit of points deducted so that you have an emphasis to keep on track. I promise that I will never make homework due sooner than it's currently listed on the syllabus, but it may due later. My goal is to have at least a week between when we finish talking about something and when you're responsible for providing some sort of understanding or demonstration of that, so it might get pushed later. In terms of what I'm going to have you do to help work on your mastery, only 3 formative assessments this time, so these are each worth 3 points. The idea is to provide an opportunity for structured review, to go over vocabulary and concepts, as well as potentially some story problems where I'm asking you to play the consultant or think about what you would do in a particular situation. I also want you to use these as an opportunity to ask me for things that you want to go over. So if you have other topics that are within that unit or even things from before, like I still don't understand this, can we talk about this again? You're perfectly allowed to write those things as part of your responses because that helps me know what to focus on, particularly if more than one of you tells me the same thing. So I have 4 homeworks planned. The first one is different. The first one is designed to facilitate review of everything that I would hope that you understand before we dive into new stuff. For some of you, this will cover things that we just finished last semester. Others of you, it will cover things that you may have had from other sources, other classes on campus or workshops. And so this is my chance to make sure that we're on the same page with respect to the terminology and notation. And some of you, this might be stuff that you had, 2 years ago from me or from someone else. So to try and keep us all on sort of a level playing field, I wanted to spend a decent amount of effort trying to review this week and then have you be able to test yourselves as to how much of this you remember. So homework 1 is actually available now. It's 10 questions. A lot of the questions were taken from the review questions at the end of my textbook chapters. And so you can look at what those entail. The way that I want to structure this is to do 2 different drafts. Excuse me for a second. Diet Mountain Dew hits the spot when you're teaching, doesn't it? I know, it's the best stuff ever. The original green flavor today, whatever that's supposed to be. Maybe lime with air quotes around it, something like that. Anywho, so what I want to do for homework 1 is to have you start by doing your best you can to answer the questions. You can look at the book, you can look at anything you want to, and you'll turn it in to me so that I can see that you made an effort. I'm not going to read it carefully, I'm not going to provide feedback. Then we will spend the bulk of a single class session, or more sessions if we need to, going over the answers. And then you can revise your answers and turn it in again for what I'm calling an accuracy draft. So you get 5 points for giving it a try, answering all the questions as best you can, and then you get a chance to revise it based on our discussion in class. And then I will grade it and provide you with feedback myself. Sorry, I'm going to have a coughing fit. Ugh. I spent most of my winter break sick. It wasn't COVID, just, some other fun thing. And I still have like this, like the drainage that just like creeps down your throat and it makes you like choke on it and stuff. Yummy, right? I hope everybody finished their lunch ahead of time, but I'm coughing for a few minutes here. Oh. I saw Jonathan a few minutes ago, and he's like, "You ready for class?" I'm like, "We'll find out." Apparently my throat is not ready for class, but we're trying to make it work. He told me that the adrenaline would carry me through. I'm like, you have a funny definition of adrenaline. One would tend not to think that this is an adrenaline-filled experience, right? Particularly given that we're all sitting. But all right, I think I got it back. All right, so that's homework 1. 2, 3, and 4 are going to be the more typical, I give you a data set, you give me models and answers back. So I have those as usual. I promise that I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I haven't given you an example explicitly for. It is not your job to go to the Google and try to figure out how to do stuff at this level. I think that is unfair. It's an unreasonable thing to ask you. So I want to at least give you practice with sort of the core sets of models and things in a very structured attempt. But then it's time to take the training wheels off. So 30 points out of 100 will be based on your participation in a project. The idea is that you take data that you care about and you do something that we've covered in class with it. And I'm willing to make it as broad and flexible as it would be to be useful to you. Useful is the goal here. Like eventually I'd like you to be able to submit this as a conference presentation, as a manuscript, as something like that. You can choose whether you want to work in pairs or work by yourself. When I was in college, I hated group work. I absolutely hated it. So if you feel like that, work on yourself. If you're like, no, I need help, I want to buddy up with somebody and get this done, great, do it that way. I will provide you with more details about what I'm looking for, but it will be a conference-style presentation to the class, not a term paper. The idea is that what I have in my head is a conference-style presentation analogous to what we have at the Society for Multivariate Experimental Psychology, or SMEP for short, where there are 10 to 15 minutes of presenting for each person, and then 10 to 15 minutes of discussion. The idea being that we give a chance to give feedback to each other, to have questions, to give ideas, and then at that point, you will be better equipped to write a paper. The other thing is that this is not a final project. This is an April project. For better or worse, I really hate the idea of saving everything till the end of the semester when every other class has a final project or a final exam at the same time. So this is going to be throughout the month of April. And because I still think that mastery is important, you can revise your presentation. I will allow you to re-record it and submit it as a video to me if you decide that it did not go well and you want a chance to do better. I'm cool with that. I am recording this class and posting it on YouTube as usual, but none of your presentations will be on YouTube. I plan to record them and put the videos only inside Icon so that only the people in this class have access to it. If you want to be on YouTube, Godspeed. Let me know and I can put you on YouTube. But I didn't think that that was fair to ask as a requirement, right? Give a presentation to the world. Maybe that's not fair. meaning the 600 people who subscribe to my YouTube channel. The world, right? Ugh. Huey wants to be a YouTuber when he grows up. Did you know that? That is now a thing. That is a career goal that children have, to be a YouTuber. And do you know what his father got him for Christmas? To help, a little video recorder thingy, so he can start recording himself playing Nintendo for a YouTube channel. I know. I can't believe that the people he watches make a living playing Nintendo on camera for the world. But apparently that is a thing. So, anywho, questions so far? Are we feeling overwhelmed or excited or somewhere in the middle? Overwhelmed is thumbs down, excited is thumbs up, and somewhere in the middle is thumb sideways. Okay, sideways to up. Okay. Overwhelmed is acceptable, by the way. I feel overwhelmed just looking at all of this, but it's like we'll have it in pieces and it'll be okay. But at some point, what I want you to be able to start to do is to look at a problem and figure out what you're supposed to do, as opposed to me being like, run this model, now run that model, now do this, now do that, because that's the type of skill that you need eventually. Yes, sir?
For the project, is there a written component to it, or is it just a presentation?
You will start with a plan, basically, a written outline that you will submit ahead of time. I will give you feedback.
Okay.
Another component to it is that each of you is going to be a peer reviewer of another presentation, where you will have to provide them with structured feedback. So those two pieces are written. But I do not anticipate needing a paper to report the results. I want to do it as a presentation, because I think there's an extent to which, if the models that you're working with aren't a good choice, for instance, and you write a 30-page paper about like the wrong analysis, that might not be the best use of your time, as opposed to putting together, 15 PowerPoint slides, which hopefully won't have the same level of effort, but would still serve the same purpose of communicating what you're able to do. If you can learn to give a good talk, you can really set yourself apart as a professional. There are so many bad talks at conferences. The good news is that for graduate students, if you give a bad talk, no one will remember or care, because they don't expect you to give a great talk. But if you give a great talk, people will remember you and give you opportunities to talk more at other places. So I'd like to give you a little bit of practice in that skill set. Okay. Other questions or comments? Thumb sideways, up, 45-degree angle, maybe? Something like that? All right. So what else will we be working on? So my job is to answer your questions. I am very rarely in this building, I will be honest with you. If you're waiting for me outside my office, you're going to be waiting a very long time, unless it's like a class day. But if you want to talk to me, email is the best way to reach me. I'm on email very frequently, and I'm happy to hop on Zoom or schedule a meeting with you if you want to talk to me individually. So I promise to be accessible to you, even if I'm not physically in the building. As usual, we're doing office hours in a Zoom group-based format. This semester, they are 12 to 1:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays. I picked that because I looked at the class schedule and tried to figure out when you would have your other classes and try not to overlap them. So I realized that if you come to office hours and you come to this class, then you're with me over the lunch hour, like 4 days out of the week. Eat in front of me. It's fine. Just try to have like a lid or like something that won't spill all over the computers. That's the only thing that I ask. But if you need to bring your lunch to class, or eat lunch while you're talking to me during office hours, I'm totally fine with that. So what you should do then, beyond the coursework, ask me questions. You know the drill. There is no such thing as a stupid question. If you ask a question and you think that it's something that you should know already and you feel bad, one of two things will happen. Other people will be like, oh, thank God she asked that. I had no idea, and I didn't want to have to ask it, and you will make someone else feel better. If the other people know the answer already, guess what? Then you make them feel good for the fact that they already knew the answer, because then you've given them validation that they understand. So either way, questions are a good thing. I'm happy to have questions over email or individually, but if it's something that I feel like everyone can benefit from, then I'd prefer to do it in this environment so that everyone can hear the answers. Please ask me for help if you get stuck on homework. You can email me a screenshot of your code and the answers and tell me what's not working. It will be most useful if you start with the example syntax files directly rather than the handouts, because then you can edit them. Copy and paste and find and replace is your friend. Okay, find and replace is your friend for a lot of these. So I'm trying to make the work minimal in terms of giving you stuff to start with, as usual. The readings. So as usual in these advanced sorts of classes, there are a lot of readings. Do I expect you to read every single thing this semester? Not necessarily. Do I expect you to read my textbook? Yes. I spent 5 years of my life writing the book because I had been teaching longitudinal models for like 10 years and I was growing more and more dissatisfied with what was out there. It was either wrong or incomplete or written about like, cows and fields rather than people, like the biostat sort of books. So I made the textbook for people who are either learning from me in the classes or who are trying to teach themselves. And what I have to say is literally like I wrote the book from my lectures, not the other way around. So they will go together. Now that being said, I wrote that book between about 2010 and 2014, and there's some stuff in it that is either out of date or what I've subsequently learned flat out wrong. Yeah, I know. I worked that hard and it's not right anymore. Because what we've learned about how models work and how data work and what syntax and what is possible continues to change. So I have a whole lot of readings that are sort of the current status of where things are right now. Some of it might contradict what I said in books. All of the articles that I picked because they were either extremely readable or extremely important in terms of like the focus of those. So I don't necessarily expect you to have read them like before class or anything, but I want you to have access to them so that they can be future references. In terms of ordering of things, I would prefer to have the first shot. So let me do the lecture first and then do the readings. I think it will go better that way, but it's really up to you. And if you have questions about other analyses you're working on that are longitudinal or somewhat related to what we're talking about, please ask me about those too. I'm happy to talk about other data types of analyses because the more examples we have, the better. Okay, how are we doing? I stopped coughing for a minute, so there's that. So yes, attendance. I'm happy you're all here. Whether you're on Zoom, hi Zoomers, I see you too. Thanks for having your cameras on. Or roomers as well. But you can choose how you want to attend or if you want to attend. I used to be a lot more strict about this, but in the last probably 3 years or so, there's been many students who never ever came to class and they just watched the videos and they did fine. So if you find yourself in a position where you prefer to be sort of asynchronous at points in the class, so long as you keep up with your work, I'm okay with that. If you're going to have to miss a class or two, I'm okay with that. Now, if you ghost me, right, like if I don't hear from you and you don't do anything, then I reserve the right to start nagging you. But otherwise, I trust you to make the best decisions about how to spend your time and the format. You'll notice I'm still in a mask. Yes, it's annoying, but you know what's really annoying? Waking up in the middle of the night and coughing for an hour. So I'm sticking with this. I prefer it if all of us can come here and not worry about making each other sick. So that's my perspective. If you are sick, please don't come. Please attend on Zoom or make up the time otherwise. I will record all the classes, and if for whatever reason the recording doesn't work, I will redo the lecture. So there will be a copy of everything that happens. You're welcome to use the chat window inside Zoom to send me anonymous questions, or you're welcome to interrupt me at any point to ask your questions live, either way. So that's all good. It is January, which means winter is still upon us for at least probably 2 more months. If the weather is bad, check your email. If the public schools are closed, odds are good I have to stay home with my son and I'm going to be Zooming from home. So I will not hesitate to eject to a Zoom-only format due to illness or if it's not safe to come to campus. So I promise, though, to let you know by 9 a.m. on class days how things are going. All right, software. So the models that we're working with, I think you can use sort of a big picture division as to whether they can be done only in a univariate framework or whether they have to be done in a multivariate framework. And that distinction has choices with respect to what software packages are available. So my definition of univariate in this context is a model that predicts one longitudinal outcome. So like response time measured over 6 sessions, health scores measured annually for 4 years. Like that's univariate to me, even though technically it's multivariate because it's repeated measures on a person. But from a longitudinal modeling perspective, that's univariate. If you have a model where you're only predicting one outcome at a single time, then you can use traditional multi-level modeling or mixed effects modeling software, such as the mixed packages in SAS or SPSS, LME4 and NLME in R. There's a Windows-based program called HLM. There's a program that they use in Europe more, which is MLWin. All of those things can be used for univariate models. As you know, I am still working on getting better at R and to some extent Stata as well. So if you come across something that you think might help me do something more efficiently or less wrong, please let me know. I will not be offended. I appreciate the help. So Stata I am sticking with because I need to have something to check R against, to be honest with you. I don't trust R. And there's been times where I've had things come out either wrong or unconverged in R that converge in other packages. So for my own sanity, I'm sticking with another package too so that I have checks and balances across them. Stata is updated much more frequently than SAS, and it's used by a lot of different disciplines. And so that's the reason that I picked that one. It also has good documentation in a standardized format. R, of course, is the Wild West. The R packages are only as good as the authors, and so some packages do some things and not others, and the language is somewhat idiosyncratic, which drives me a little bit nuts. But I understand that for better or worse, the world is moving towards R and Python. And isn't there another one too? Like, it seems like there's new ones every day.
Julia?
What is it?
Julia?
Yeah, like I keep hearing like there's another one? Like I just got into R. And if anyone asks me about Python, no. I can only do so much with the new software. So I am still working my way through all of these things with respect to, so this is univariate. The other side of it is multivariate, which is where you're predicting more than one longitudinal outcome at the same time. Most of this we are going to be doing within the package called M+. All of you should have access to M+ inside the virtual desktop. So one of the things I'd like you to do this week is please verify that you do. I sent a list of all of your IDs to our tech people, and we got the M+ license updated, so it's the most current version of M+ in there. That software is capable of doing basically everything that we would want. You can do traditional multi-level models in it. You can do structural equation models, which when people say that term, they mean single level, and what is known as multi-level structural equation models, or MSEMs, also known as dynamic structural equation modeling. That's another new word. Dynamic is multi-level SEM with a few extra features that M+ threw in. Why not other packages? So it is possible, for instance, to use Lavon and R to do SEM. And Lavon and R has a little bit of MSEM. But what it doesn't have are certain options that are essential in modeling change over time accurately. So T-scores, for instance. Definition variables is what they're called more generally. It's the idea of being able to have unbalanced time, different time sets of observations per person. That option doesn't exist within Lavon. It does exist within OpenMX, I think. There's an MX package in R, but that's a whole brand new one that I haven't tried to do yet. Lavon doesn't have random slopes in its multi-level SEM package. So that means nobody can change differently over time. Like that pretty much shuts that down. There are new features in the dynamic SEM in M+ that allow you to look at lagged relationships and long data. That's not a thing that can be replicated otherwise. So there are reasons why I'm favoring M+, and the good news is that you don't have to pay for it. You have free access to it. 3 reasons, that's 1. Pragmatism. These models get really complex really quickly. And so being able to show the same model in like 2 or 3 different packages, I feel like would bog us down more than that is worth. It's a lot easier if you have like a regression model. Oh, here's a regression model in SAS. Here it is in Stata. These models, like the code for them, take up pages and pages and pages. So it just becomes unwieldy. And also, if you can figure out how to do the same model, like basically 3 different ways in M+, that helps you make connections across how is this the same, how is this different, and in what circumstances would I want to do it this way versus that way, and in which circumstances do I have to do it this way. One of the reasons why I can't get through time-varying predictors in the first longitudinal class is that to do them properly requires a multivariate model. So the ways to do it without that are approximations that are only valid in certain circumstances. So we have to build everything into the multivariate side to do it properly. Okay, so organization then of topics. The beginning, reviewing what we know, plus starting to drop seeds into where we're headed. So I call this foreshadowing. Reviewing longitudinal multi-level models with time invariant predictors. So starting with that framework as a baseline and then showing how that translates into the SEM frameworks. Alternative time is the first new topic, which is necessary to consider in what are known as accelerated longitudinal designs. So like if you have kids that start a study, some of the kids are in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and then you follow them all for 3 years, that's called an accelerated design. Because you have 6 years of time, even though like one kid only gives you 3 out of the 6. Turns out those models necessarily become more complicated because you have to keep track of cross-sectional time differences in addition to longitudinal time differences. After that, I decided to show how those models can be done as structural equation models and as multi-level structural equation models. So I did a little bit of that last semester, but I did it in videos that weren't during class. So I'm planning on making that a point of emphasis. That way we have all 3 potential frameworks available to us in terms of how we can estimate things. Next is modeling change in latent factors. So I recognize not everyone has had SEM, right? How many of you have had SEM before? We'll ask it that way. Several of you, but not everybody. Okay, so there'll have to be a little bit of review of the idea of a measurement model first, but then it's the question of how do I have fixed and random effects of time where everything's in latent space? It's tricky. Then we get the whole time-varying predictors palooza. And in a nutshell, the reason why time-varying predictors are so hard is the exact same reason why we have to go to all this trouble for a time-varying outcome. Any outcome that's measured longitudinally, repeatedly, has between-person differences in it, like some people are higher or lower, some people change more, change less, and within-person fluctuation. So we spent a whole semester like going over that for outcomes. Guess what? If you have a variable that's an X instead of a Y, same shit. You have to worry about all of that. And so how to get all of those things at the same time for multiple variables simultaneously, and then how to specify the relationships, that gets to be quite complicated. So these are all the special cases. Start with the univariate approach, what is known as cluster mean centering or person mean centering, which can work in certain cases, but not many. Multivariate approaches, which is the MSEM version of it for fluctuation type studies, and then for individual change. Commonality and multivariate change, so extensions where you're looking at to what degree are intercepts related to each other across outcomes and slopes related to each other across outcomes, what's known as a factor of curves model. I want to do at least one of those. And then lagged effects. So if nothing else comes from this class, I want you to be able to tell everyone you've ever met that autoregressive cross-leg panel models are terrible ideas. I will die on this hill. I will plant my flag at the top of the hill. You can bury me right next to my flag. If nothing else, I want folks to understand this because that model is so ubiquitous and it could not be more wrong in its original form. So why that is, how to fix it, and all of that nuance, that's time-varying predictors. So at this point in the semester then, my vision for your project would be something in this list. So you don't have to decide now. I'm just planting the seed for what I would think about. Because there's only a few weeks left after that where we're looking at intensive longitudinal data, and then the projects start, and then the last week I have time-varying groups. So if you're interested in doing something with intensive longitudinal data, you could potentially do that, but we would finish that unit pretty close to when the projects start. So that would be something like ecological momentary assessment studies where like people beep you on your phone 3 times a day and you answer questions, like those kinds of studies. They typically would need to have 3-level models instead of 2 for observations nested within like a day and days nested in people. So there's a extra layer of complexity to that. Okay. Questions? Comments?
What is the homework 0?
Homework 0 is your chance to get 2 points of extra credit for learning how to use the homework system that will be used for 2, 3, and 4. I am planning on having that available to you on Thursday. It will take you a good 30 seconds to finish it, and then you basically get a free late homework at some point for your effort. It is the same homework system as in semesters past with an important distinction. Jonathan fixed the security certificate. So everybody who was pissed off and annoyed by that, I'm sorry, he fixed it. It was not me, he did it. So give him the credit and the accolades that he deserves for fixing that. It also got him away from family time at my parents' house. So I think he was figuring that was a good trade. There's so many games of cards you could play with your family before you lose your will to live. That's what I learned.
Is
Anywho.
it the same homework system as in Kansas?
It is. It's grown, and it's actually in the process of becoming an actual product. We got an internal grant last year to turn it into a real thing. So we're nowhere near that yet, but that down the road is the vision to actually have it be a more general system that we could integrate like into Icon and other people could use it. So yes, it is the same. It's been the same for like 12 years, I think. It started a long time ago at Nebraska. It started when I used to cap all of my classes at between 12 to 15 people, and that became untenable. And so like we taught a class that had 46 people. It's like, how do I grade 46 homeworks every week? You make the computer do it is the answer. So it grew out of a necessity. I know, look at those faces, like, oh, yeah, it can be a lot. So there, that's all I have to say about that.